Catherine is secretly in love with the other main character in this story and this scandal, and he is, of course, Thomas Seymour. So, Owen, Thomas Seymour. How old was he at this time that the scandal kind of played out, and who is he?
So, Thomas Seymour is the younger brother of Edward Seymour, who becomes the Lord Protector. So,
he's the regent?
So his brother is regent,
yes.
and he is essentially a spare. He's
a spare to the fake heir.
Indeed, and his sister, of course, was...
Yes.
Yeah. He's uncle to Edward. His sister had been Queen Jane Seymour.
Right. So he moves in a pretty important circle.
Very much so. He enters into the Privy Chamber when his sister becomes queen, and he's made captain of the Cinque Ports and other, really...
Cinque Ports being quite a big deal.
Yeah, absolutely. And when his brother is made Lord Protector, he is given the title of Admiral. So you do get the feeling that he is always slightly resentful of his older brother's achievements. And I think when Edward Seymour takes that position of Lord Protector, there's some real family resentment going on, and things start to sour quite quickly.
Okay, so Elizabeth and Thomas Seymour, where are we with them at this point? Because is he married, Thomas? Is he single? Is he a bit of a catch? I mean, this picture doesn't tell us huge amounts. We can't see much.
Very wealthy, but Thomas, just as Owen said, it's a battle between brothers. Thomas and Edward come to hate each other, and Edward has all the power. Thomas says, well, being admiral is a bit rubbish. I want more than this. And what he starts to think he can do is he is going to use women to get this power. And his first idea is, how can I undermine my brother? I think, I know, I'll marry young Elizabeth. I'm going to marry this young girl, 13-year-old girl. So within a month, pretty much, of Henry dying, he writes to Elizabeth and says, will you marry me? And this is a very much older man, 25 years her senior, saying...
Let me just recap these facts.
Will you marry me, please?
Because they're quite large facts to digest. So Henry VIII, most powerful man in the land, is days dead, right? He's recently dead.
Yes.
Thomas sees his brother Edward walking around with a position and a title. He thinks, I want that. How am I going to get that? I'm going to use women to advance my position. At this point, Elizabeth is not even in line to take the crown. Her brother will do that. He decides that she is a good play, but who asks a 13-year-old child to marry them? Was that normal back then, Liz?
It's not really normal. You would expect a royal bride to potentially be engaged when they're a toddler sometimes. Elizabeth's sister Mary, she's had a few betrothals in her early childhood. Henry VIII had been betrothed to Catherine of Aragon in his childhood. His brother had previously been betrothed to her.
Betrothed's one thing, but it doesn't mean that you're having an active relationship, because obviously through today's lens, that sounds like child abuse.
Yeah, absolutely. And you wouldn't expect a man who isn't royal, like Thomas Seymour, necessarily to be trying to marry a royal princess who's 13, or anyone who's 13. In fact, child marriage is pretty unusual in the Tudor period. Generally, the age of consent for a girl is seen as 14, which is still incredibly young, but Elizabeth is clearly below that.
But we also know that Catherine Parr is secretly in love with Thomas, and she would much rather have married Thomas than King Henry VIII. And yet they end up together, don't they? He ends up after. So Elizabeth says, what? When he sends this marriage proposal to a young 13-year-old orphan.
One month after her father dies. Yeah. I mean, it's just scandalous what he does.
What does she say?
So she basically says, my father's just died, I'm much too young, ask me later, or, just go away, effectively. So, she uses her youth and the fact that her father has died,
which are mourning for
perfectly good reasons, and really that draws a line under it.
But she is living under the same roof as Catherine Parr, and in Catherine's care, who is also in love with Thomas, and does Thomas reciprocate this?
I think he has affection for Catherine Parr, but I don't think we can overlook the fact that she is an enormously wealthy woman at this stage. She inherits a huge amount from the king. She's sort of the second best route, I think, for Thomas Seymour. Elizabeth has said, I am too young. She does give that time frame, as you said, of 2 years. I think in that moment she is acknowledging herself, I am far too young for this, and as you say, come back to me at that later date. So Thomas seems to fall back into that romance that he had with Catherine Parr, and
Catherine is recently widowed, right? This is after the death of King Henry VIII. Thomas marries Queen Catherine Parr, and this happened like with 34 days, within 34 days.
It's totally shocking.
And
it's secret. It's totally
of the
shocking.
death, sorry.
Henry dies, and, by the kind of late spring, Catherine and Seymour are married, and that is absolutely shocking because she's supposed to be in mourning, he is supposed to be in mourning, she's the king's wife, and really, just as Owen says, she is fabulously wealthy, and Henry VIII's will says that she, no other woman, is to be the preeminent woman in the land. She's the top woman in the land. She gets to wear her the crown jewels until Edward reaches majority. So what Thomas is doing is he's capturing the top woman in the land. And
who happens to love him.
Happens to love him. He exploits that. We also might suggest she's a conduit to Elizabeth. He is doing a very bad thing at this moment. She's in love with him. She's in mourning. She's in a very bad way. And he seizes Catherine.
He didn't get permission.
no.
Permission had not been granted by the king
secretly.
or the Lord Protector, which would have been his older brother.
They'd have said no.
Because they would have stopped it.
Totally.
So, and permission to marry, well, who effectively the Queen, because she is still considered to be.
She's the Dowager Queen, and she's the top woman. And you know what really the Lord Protector, his wife, is always really annoyed that Catherine Parr gets to be top, and they're always fighting for precedence, and they're always fighting over jewels. So the fact that the brother number 2 has married this powerful queen in secret, it is a total scandal.
I mean, goodness me. And then the marriage to Catherine Parr effectively made Thomas Seymour Elizabeth's stepfather.
Very nice.
The same Elizabeth that he just proposed to.
So
Yeah.
Yeah.
It's enormously creepy. And essentially he becomes her guardian as well, because that role had very much been Catherine's upon the death of Henry. So he is in a position of responsibility here as well.
Because he's in charge.
Yeah.
the man.
Once a woman marries a man in Tudor England, even if she's the queen, the husband is in charge. He's in control of her money, he's in control of her person. Everything she owns belongs to him. And we can see that Thomas is very much keen to exploit that.
And
Isn't he just?
I think he was fond of Catherine, but what he wanted was power and money and to annoy his brother. And essentially he wants...
Hat-trick, he got the lot.
He got the lot. He got the lot.
did.
And really, you have to feel very sorry for Catherine Parr at this point. Sorry for Elizabeth. She's like, oh no, this man who tried to get me to marry him, who I know likes me, is now my stepfather.
Got
And
to
sorry
call
for
him
Catherine
daddy.
Parr.
Ugh.
Just, they have this wonderful house in Chelsea, but with Catherine and Thomas and young Elizabeth all living there together, it's going to be a tinderbox.